Well, this is fun. So I was supposed to be Phil Graham here, and I am obviously a very poor substitute for Phil Graham, but it's so exciting to be able to do this.
Phil, let me say, you've gotten a lot better looking. And Phil would be the first one to agree with that.
He would.
Thank you, Senator Cruz. And for those of you, I know I filled in Senator Cruz and Senator Cornyn, you won't be surprised to hear this, but for those of you who are here this morning for Senator Graham's breakfast keynote, it was one of the most inspiring speeches I've heard in a really long time. And he walked off the stage and I said, Senator Graham, you've still got it. He said, yes, I know.
Yes, I know.
Yes, I know. All right, well, let's do this. If y'all don't mind, and by the way, I've given them no prep. They have no idea what we're going to talk about. This is kind of fun. I could be a talk show host. This is really cool. I've never done this before. Let's start. I'd love to get y'all's perspective, just for the general audience, on what happened on Election Day and how America was shocked, frankly. Curious whether either of you were shocked. Most people in this room probably say they were, some wouldn't. But your general thoughts on the election and what it means and sort of what this looks like going forward. Senator Cornyn.
Well, I was interested in what Ted would say. I'm sure he'll add a few thoughts, but yeah, what a surprise this year was. But frankly, I think it's a indication that people were tired of both political parties and the lack of results that followed from the status quo, and they wanted
Absolutely.
to shake things up, and boy, they did.
They sure did. They sure did.
But there's a couple of quick points I want to make. One is they thought that the majority of the House and the Senate deserved to be returned, and they decided to give us a president that would actually pass legislation, that would sign legislation that we would pass.
That's right.
Which is going to be really important. And did I mention Obamacare? I think. And then the other quick point I want to make is just what a historic opportunity this is. I think since 1945, the same political party has had the White House and a majority of both the House and the Senate 14 times. 14 times since 1945. Republicans 3 times out of that 14 times. So if we don't get it done now, I just don't know when it's going to happen. So this is a historic opportunity.
Amen to that. Senator Cruz.
Well, look, I mean, Election Day, known to members of the media as the day of apocalypse.
Yes.
It was an amazing day. Nobody knew for sure what was going to happen, but I'll tell you, I was not really all that surprised in that this was a change election. The people of America overwhelmingly wanted a change, and Hillary Clinton embodied the status quo.
That's right.
She embodied a set of policies that's been an absolute disaster. And I think the election was a mandate for change. It was a rejection of the path we're on. I got to tell you, just after the election, I was back in the Capitol and was going up an elevator with a fairly well-known Democratic senator who will remain nameless. And he was just staring forward in this almost catatonic state. And it was bewilderment. It was just I don't understand the world I'm in. And, you know, Schadenfreude, taking joy in the misery of others, it's not a pretty sentiment. But I'll confess I was unable to suppress at least the tiniest grin. And I agree with John. I think we have been given something really special. We have been given an incredible opportunity. It is rare historically that Republicans are given the White House, every executive branch in both houses of Congress. Now we got to deliver. There are no more excuses. We got to stand up and deliver, and I couldn't be more excited for us to stand up and work together and actually do what we promised the people to do. I think it really is an historic opportunity.
It really is, and you know, I don't know that the three of us have spoken of this before. I think Senator Cornyn, maybe you and I did in Dallas, but when I was watching what was happening and you would see then Donald Trump, the candidate, going into Erie, Pennsylvania in the fall, and 20,000 people would come and show up in very blue collar, very Democrat Erie, Pennsylvania. And then Hillary Clinton would go in for her rallies, and 1,000 people might come, or 1,500. Did you, because you were actually on the trail for a good part of last year too, did you sort of sense that it's time for a change?
This election was about the working men and women of this country. That's what decided it. It was the Reagan Democrats. This election was decided by steel workers, by truck drivers, by mechanics, by carpenters, by plumbers, by cleaning ladies, by people with calluses on their hands. You know, I'm reminded of a story of someone who was at a polling place and described an African-American gentleman who came in, and they had two different spots to vote, Republican and Democrat, and he said, well, I'm not sure where I'm supposed to go. And this woman said, she responded, says, well, sir, I see you've got calluses on your hands. That suggests to me you work for a living. That tells me you belong in the Republican line.
Senator Cornyn, did you also get a sense of the feel of the sea change that seemed to be underfoot? That now when we're looking back, and I'll say this too, you know, in the last 8 to 10 years, 1,000 state legislative seats have moved from blue to red. So 1,000 more Republicans are now seated in state legislatures across the country than there were before Barack Obama was elected president. And the same with the the state senates, the state houses. So many across the country have flipped from blue to red in just 8 years. I think the total number, they call it the trifecta, but states that have all three, the House, the Senate, and the governorship. Of course, crazy Nebraska has their own little tan thing going on. They don't have both of those. They only have one, so we take Nebraska out. But I think it was 8 years ago, we're all completely red, and today it's almost 27. I think we've gone from 9 to 27 states. So while everyone seems shocked, you know, in the media and many of us at the results of the presidential election, when you look back, it's what's happened, and the government closer to the people seems to be moving in more of a freedom-oriented direction. Maybe it isn't so shocking.
Thank you, Obama.
Yes.
Well, you know, it's always tempting when you're in power to try to maximize what you can do when you're in power. But I think the Obama administration and Democrats in the House and the Senate took it to such an extreme that it backfired on them, and unfortunately on the American people as well. And so today the Democrats have 48 senators. They had 60 at the height after the 2008 election. They're in the minority in the House of Representatives, and as you mentioned, all across the state houses and governors' mansions in the United States, we've seen a movement in our direction. And frankly, I think one of the most important messages of this election is that people are not comfortable with power being centralized in Washington, D.C. There's some things that have to be done.
That's right.
There's some things like national defense have to be done in Washington, D.C. But I'm hard-pressed that after that to describe things that are actually done better there than they are in places like Texas. And of course, as Louis Brandeis called the states the laboratories of democracy, what we've been able to demonstrate is a better way here in Texas, thanks to TPPF and thanks to great leaders in the legislature and the governors of Texas who have demonstrated that our philosophy and our is not just academic or philosophical, but it's actually practical. It delivers a better result in terms of the prosperity and quality of life for the American people.
Amen. Well, it's very nice you just mentioned that, because my next question, now let's talk about Texas. What do you guys think?
I didn't read your notes at all.
I know. I think maybe you're looking over my shoulder. We talk a lot here about the Texas model, and I know for those of us that have been doing this and at this for a long time, we are very proud of what I believe to be a move to a lot less government and a real focus on how do we get government out of the lives of everyday Texans in this state. Now we can talk about the locals later. That's a whole other issue. But as far as the state government goes, and I think per the laboratories of democracy, it's been really encouraging. And when you look at the numbers, a state like California, which has twice the taxes, twice the size of the state government, and twice the poverty we do in Texas, that's an extraordinary story that we need to be telling. So how do you guys see, as we move into a new era in Washington, D.C., how do the lessons of Texas specifically potentially mold where we see the government of our country moving with this White House and the U.S. Senate?
Well, look, I think Texas, we understand some basic principles. Number one, we understand freedom matters. This is a state that was built on freedom. I like to describe Texas as America on steroids. You know, you take every value that built America, and Texas focuses those values. We've got a frontier mentality that I think Texans, we inherently view, you know, give me a horse and a plane and a gun and an open field, and I can conquer the world. And what Texas has demonstrated powerfully is that when you get government off the backs of small businesses, when you lift the tax burden, you lift the regulatory burden, you keep people safe, and other than that, stay the heck out of their hair, amazing things happen.
Amen.
And my hope and belief is we're going to bring those same values, the economic model that works, back to Washington. I mean, listen, both John and I experience the same thing. We both travel all over the state, and Texas has amazing diversity. And yet one of the things that strikes me is despite all that diversity, how much there is in common. It doesn't matter. You can be in East Texas, West Texas, you can be in the Valley or up in the Panhandle, and the number one priority of Texans all over this state is over and over and over again jobs. That's what you hear. I want jobs, I want more jobs, I want wages rising, I want to be able to provide for my kids. You don't see Texans saying, take care of me. You see Texans saying, give me an environment where I can take care of me, and I can take care of my kids, and I can achieve my dreams. And that's what I believe in the next 4 years, we're going to do everything possible to bring to Washington and to bring to the country.
Amen.
Well, what I would just add to what Ted said is that clearly people are voting with their feet for what they consider to be a better opportunity for them, as Ted indicated. 1,200 people a day moving to our state. Now, some people have asked me, do you worry that all these Californians moving to Texas are going to change the nature and character of our state? And I said, well, no, not really, because these are the ones who are fleeing.
That's exactly right.
A system of government and with all the things we know that stifles individual liberty and economic growth and prosperity for something better. And so I'm not too worried about that. But let me just say amen to what Ted said about the diversity of our state. I think most people in this world in which our Democratic friends focus on identity politics, they assume that just because you're a minority, Hispanic or African American, or maybe you're from India or whatever, that somehow you naturally have to believe a certain way. What's attracted the diversity that Ted alluded to earlier is the opportunity. And I'll just mention one thing. I've had recently a meeting with Congressman Ted Poe in front of a Korean American community group in Houston, Texas. And I just was thrilled to hear Ted explain to them the difference between y'all and all y'all. Actually, Ted, I did disagree with Ted because he said y'all was singular and all y'all was plural. I actually think they're both plural, is my view.
I think that's right.
But the point is, you know, one of the things we do need to do, and I'm really glad to see the film that you had earlier demonstrating just because you're a Native American doesn't mean you're, you are stuck in a particular political framework or with a particular political party. And I think we just need to keep taking that story to these people who came here because they wanted to pursue the American dream and explain to them how our policies and our approach are better for them than the alternative.
Absolutely. That is a really good point. And I wasn't necessarily...
Let me briefly amplify on a point there, which is while we're building a wall, it's occurred to me more than once we may want to think about a wall on our western border too.
All the way.
And in particular, now listen, I married a native Californian, and I'm incredibly fortunate and lucky for it, but when you see folks from California come into our great state, and here in the People's Republic of Travis County, that's particularly relevant, it does strike me we ought to think about, just at the border, having an entrance exam. As you're coming over, just say, do you understand that massive taxes and regulation destroy jobs and make everyone miserable?
Check yes
And
or no.
if not, turn around and go back to the place that you guys screwed up already.
Yes. Yes. Well, I think it's a great point you make about demographics and certainly making connections to those who may not have always believed that the ideals that you both stand for, I know, in this organization and probably most people in this room, that is what the American dream is about. And when I tell people that our last election in Texas with Governor Abbott and Lieutenant Governor Patrick, so not the presidential, but the gubernatorial, that they both had almost 50% of the Hispanic vote. So it's really interesting because I think the presidential election before that, it hovered in the low 20s, maybe the high teens. So there is a message and there is a component of what we do that is connecting. And how do we, I'd love your comment on that too, but then how do we export that model to the country? Because I know you all have seen the numbers. I think that Hillary Clinton won 85 of the 90 or 100 largest urban areas in the country, and that's where her vote came from. So when you look at the map of America, it's all red in terms of the voting except the big cities around our country. So if y'all have any thoughts, I'd love to hear them on what we need to do to continue to bring in and widen the tent and persuade people why our ideas are the best.
Well, Brooke, I appreciate your mentioning how well the lieutenant governor and the governor did. Actually, I beat them both.
I mean, that's good to know. I didn't remember
It was some
that.
unusual circumstance, but I actually got a plurality of 48% of the Hispanic vote in 2014. And to me, the lesson's pretty simple, and frankly, I'd like to try to make sure that we, as Republicans, as well as conservatives, more broadly, recognize that it's pretty straightforward. And it's the human-to-human contact. It's demonstrating respect and showing up. I mean, for me, it's not that much more complicated. Because if once we do demonstrate respect and we show up, then we have an opportunity to tell our story and to say what we were alluding to earlier, that really it's our principles that will actually produce a better outcome for them and their family and help them pursue the American dream. And I think that's a pretty basic formula that we just need to keep at the forefront of our minds.
Amen.
Well, look, when you talk about the Hispanic community, I think that is clearly a major issue that we need to be thinking about. It's not complicated. Texas is right now a majority-minority state. We are on a path to being a majority Hispanic state. And I think the Democrats want desperately to try to turn the Hispanic community into the equivalent for their party of what much of the African American community has been, which has been a very reliable voting bloc with big majorities. I don't think it's going to work. And the Hispanic community, particularly here in Texas, we're a very conservative community. The values in the Hispanic community, faith, family, patriotism. An interesting point about Hispanics people don't always realize, Hispanics have the highest rate of military enlistment of any demographic in this country. And I think it's right that you look at the Hispanic community in Texas. What we want is the opportunity to provide for our family. You look at the immigrant ethos. I mean, I think back to when my dad came to Austin in 1957. I mean, he was a 18-year-old kid who couldn't speak English. Now, you want to see how different Austin was. He and a couple of freshmen at UT, they were Cubans, they had no money, but they decided they wanted on Christmas Eve, they wanted to cook up a little pig, as the Cuban tradition would be, and they went and got a pig from some farmers outside of Austin, but they actually took the pig to the shore of Lake Austin and shot it in the back of the head with a pistol.
Humane.
That is humane.
Now, can you
Very
imagine
good.
if you tried that now? I don't encourage anyone to go to Hula Hut and try to shoot a pig. It's going to be a problem. But look, the ethos of coming here with nothing and being able to achieve anything is incredibly important. And let me say, as Republicans, we've got a message that works, that resonates, that when we go and communicate in the Hispanic community, communicate that we want to empower you. We want to create an environment where you can achieve the American dream, where your kids can have a better life than you can. And let me say, because there's so many incredible leaders in the Texas legislature here, and one of the things, we are so fortunate in Texas. We've got incredible leaders in this state. We've got principled conservatives in this state. But the Texas legislature is going to have an opportunity to do something extraordinary this year, which is to step up and lead and help lead the nation on school choice. And I just want to underscore, I believe school choice is the civil rights issue of the 21st century. I think school choice is an issue. If you want us to connect in the Hispanic community and to connect in the African American community, you look at every time you do polls in those communities, you see 60, 70, sometimes 80% support for choice. And it's not complicated because people want their kids to have a better life. And so I could not encourage state legislators more to take up this issue, to show courage, and to empower our kids. I think every child in Texas, every child in America deserves access to a quality education, and it doesn't matter the color of your skin, it doesn't matter your race, your ethnicity, your zip code. You deserve a chance, and that's what school choice is about.
Thank you, Senator. Let's turn our thoughts to D.C. a little bit. Things, of course, change next Friday, and you all, I know, have your own list of priorities, and you're a little busy moving some of the appointments through as well. But Senator Cornyn, maybe we'll start with you. With this new presidential administration, how does your going on offense, how does that change for you? What do your priorities look like moving into this next year?
Well, the Senate, of course, is in the personnel business because we confirm the president's cabinet and various sub-cabinet positions. So we took the first step to keep our promise to the American people that we would repeal and replace Obamacare. We did that just this week.
Yeah.
Now, our Democratic friends who, of course, shoved through this partisan legislation with 60 votes when they had the White House and they had 60 votes in the Senate and the House, they're a little bit upset with us. But the fact is, we have to keep that commitment to make health care more affordable and to give people choices and to choose where they get their health care. So that's job number one after we finish the confirmation process. Then we're going to pass another budget and get reconciliation instructions to do tax reform. That'll be in the springtime. But I'm so excited about, as Ted alluded to, the new administration and what the power of the administrative state, which has been strangling our economy and small and large businesses alike for so long, because the first thing I think President Trump is going to do is to issue a number of executive orders rescinding a lot of the Obama executive orders. We're then going to, many of his cabinet officials like Dr. Price at Health and Human Services will be able, through the administrative process, to change the regulatory environment in healthcare. And then we're going to reestablish America as a leader in the world affairs once again. One of the most encouraging things about the Trump administration to me is the fact that President-elect Trump has selected an outstanding cabinet.
Yes.
And he's selected an outstanding vice president, Mike Pence, somebody well known to all of us. And of course, we got a couple of Texans so far. Rick Perry, Secretary of Energy, and Rex Tillerson, Secretary of State. And I'm hoping before they're through, maybe we might even have another one or two. But this is it's an exciting time, and I couldn't agree more with what Ted said. Now's the time to stand and deliver, and we intend to do that.
Yeah, that's great. Senator Cruz.
Well, look, come January 20th, the boots per capita ratio in Washington is going through the roof. And by the way, it is a little known statute in this state But actually, to represent the state of Texas in the Senate, it is required that you wear black ostrich boots.
I mean, they're both wearing black ostrich boots, for those of you who can't see.
It's manly footwear.
Very manly, very manly.
Listen, it is an exciting time right now. I mean, this past week, John and I have both been engaged in hand-to-hand combat. And a point that he raised that is really important, these cabinet appointees, I think are phenomenal. I mean, this is an all-star cabinet. This is a conservative cabinet. And just like a minute ago where Brooke asked about all the Republican state legislators, and John quite rightly said, thank you, Barack Obama. You know, Barack Obama has elected more Republicans than any human being in the history of the world. And in fact, I'll tell you something else Barack Obama has done. He's sold more guns than any individual in the history of the world. I think Smith & Wesson ought to give him a Lifetime Achievement Award. But at the same time, you want to know one of the biggest reasons why this cabinet's so conservative? You can thank a charming individual named Harry Reid. And you may remember a couple of years ago when Harry Reid used what was called the nuclear option. And he blew up the rules of the Senate, said no longer is it 60 votes to confirm a cabinet member, it's 50 votes. And I remember at the time of the vote, a whole bunch of us, John and I were both telling our Democratic colleagues, you're going to regret this. You are not going to be happy you've done this. This is a mistake. And I remember telling Democratic senators on the Senate floor, I said, look, the consequence of this is going to be two things. Number one, you're going to see a whole lot more Antonin Scalias and Clarence Thomases on the Supreme Court. But I said, number two, you're going to see much more conservative cabinet appointments in the next Republican administration. And the truth of the matter is, with 60 votes, listen, the Democrats have never self-censored on who they put in the cabinet. I mean, they find their craziest nut jobs and promote them. And unfortunately, Republicans, we've demonstrated we'll confirm almost any of the nut jobs. But on the Republican side, we've always self-censored. We've always said, well, it's got to get through, you got to get 60, and so we've held back. You look at this Trump cabinet, if we needed 60 votes, if we needed 8 Democrats to get confirmed, it's not hard to see a whole bunch of these appointees who would never have been appointed. Look, Jeff Sessions as Attorney General is a rock-ribbed conservative. If we needed 8 Democrats, that would have been a much harder appointment. Scott Pruitt at EPA? You know, it's almost going to make me say something nice about Oklahoma. I love Oklahoma. I love Oklahoma. But, you know, that's an appointment, if you needed 60 votes, would have been very, very hard to do. And so one of the things that's just worth remembering, unintended consequences, Harry Reid has helped President-elect Trump give us, I think, the most conservative cabinet we've seen in decades, and that's exciting.
I agree with that.
Agreed. So speaking of unintended consequences, I know there have been a lot of discussion and back and forth, and especially from around the country, on the filibuster issue. And so I think this would be a great opportunity, because I know both of you have been involved in those discussions from D.C., to kind of talk that through with this audience. And again, speaking of unintended consequences, kind of think that out. So whoever wants to go first?
Well, you mentioned one of our personal heroes, Phil Gramm, who wrote a really good piece in the Wall Street Journal, I think it was about a week ago, on the filibuster and unintended consequences. I know how frustrating it is when you're in the majority to not be able to do what you want to do because of the 60-vote cloture requirement. And but when you're in the minority, and I've been there in the minority, we've been there in the minority, and being able to stop really bad policy is really important. Matter of fact, it may be the most important thing that we can do even in the minority. So the good news is that, as Ted mentioned, these cabinet officials are going to be all confirmed with 50 votes, 51, 50. We have 52 Republicans in the Senate. We're using the budget reconciliation process to be able to do repeal and replace Obamacare with 51 votes. And as I indicated earlier, we're going to do that with tax reform. Now, I'm hopeful we can build some bipartisan support so the reforms we pass will be durable into the future. But the good news is the politics of this 2018 cycle are far different than they were last cycle. Last cycle, we were playing defense on almost across the board. And we only had maybe one pickup opportunity, that was Nevada. We thought maybe Colorado, perhaps, but those didn't pan out. So we were playing defense. In 2018, there are 10 Democrats who are running for re-election in states that Trump carried, and pretty handily. So I think we're going to get a little help from the Twitterer in chief when it comes to getting some of these things done. But I would just return to what Ted said earlier. We need to be very cautious, because in the desire to try to get a little short-term gratification, we don't want to live to rue the day where we changed the rules, which ended up allowing the Democrats to pass tax increases, allowing them to pass cap and trade, card check, and a lot of the legislation that is really anathema to each of us. So I would just say we need to be cautious and thoughtful about this.
Well, so where it stands now on the filibuster, under what Reid did, we need 51 votes now for all executive appointees. So that's true for the cabinet, it's true for the sub-cabinet, every executive appointee. We got 52 Republicans. If we hold our conference together, we can confirm these appointees. I think we're likely to confirm Trump's entire cabinet. I hope that's happening. John and I are both helping lead the fight to make that happen, and we're seeing our conference stick together. We're seeing a degree of consensus and collaboration that is a good thing for standing up a new administration. It is also the case that you need 51 votes for judicial appointments at the district court or the Court of Appeals. So we've got over 100 vacancies across the country. We've got a bunch of vacancies here in Texas. I can tell you, for John and me, that is a big priority. We are going to be moving, and I hope and believe moving quickly with the new administration on filling those judicial vacancies. And the good news is every one of those only needs 51 votes and not 60, so if we stick together, we can confirm strong principled conservatives to the court. The two areas where there's still a 60-vote threshold are Supreme Court justices and legislation. And both of those, I suspect, are going to be major topics of debate in the coming year. I think the filibuster issue is first going to come to a T on the Supreme Court. And I am encouraged. I think President-elect Trump is going to nominate a strong, principled conservative. He's indicated, he's put out a list of 21 potential nominees. It is a strong, robust list. And I'm looking forward to standing alongside John and helping lead the fight to confirm a strong, principled conservative to the Supreme Court. When that happens, I think the current plan from leadership is to bring that up under the ordinary rules, see if we can get 60 votes, see what the Democrats do. And I got to tell you, I am concerned in that I think the Democrats' reaction to this election is that many of them have been radicalized, that the lesson they've taken was that Hillary was too moderate, and that they need more Bernie Sanders and more Elizabeth Warren. So if they go down that road, and if they all stick together, we may be facing a scenario where the Democrats are resolved to filibuster any Supreme Court nominee. I hope that's not the case. I hope we get 8 Democrats. We're going to work hard to do that. But if they decide to filibuster the Supreme Court, no matter who comes up, then I think the question of what step do we take under the rules, that will be posed directly to the Senate. And I'll tell you, actually, what our leadership has said that I very much agree, is that they are not going to succeed in filibustering a Supreme Court nominee. We are going to confirm Trump's strong conservative Supreme Court justices to the court.
Yeah, Ted's right. We're going to leave all our options on the table.
I think
That's
that's
all.
great.
That's all I'm going to say.
That's all. That's all. Okay, so let's do a quick fire round. This is going to be fun. So talking about Trump's cabinet picks, I know we love all of them, but sort of like your children, you love them all, but you like some more than others. on any given day, and it always changes. I have 4 children, so and so we love them all. But who are you most excited about? Who, when the name came down, or when you were speaking with President-elect Trump, and I mean, who were you like? Yes, this is so great, and it's going to be transformative.
Jeff Sessions.
Jeff Sessions, love it.
Well, Jeff's tremendous, and all of them are great, but of course we have to start with the Texans first. Rick Perry at the Department of Energy, Rex Tillerson as Secretary of State. But I have to tell you that, we alluded to this a little bit earlier, just in terms of the way that President Obama has let everybody from Vladimir Putin to Bashar al-Assad push him around. And so much of what my conversation with Mr. Tillerson, he's had to negotiate with Putin over the years as the CEO of ExxonMobil, and he basically told me, he said, well, Putin's not all that complicated. He said he respects strength, and when he senses weakness, he will run all over you. Mm-hmm. And that's what we've had under the current incumbent in the White House. So I look forward to the restoration of American leadership in the world, and we've got an incredible leader at the Secretary of Defense, General Mattis. Mike Pompeo of Kansas, who's the new CIA director, who will be confirmed. And then somebody we've also gotten to know and respect a lot is General John Kelly, 4-star Marine general who was in charge of Southern Command. That's everything south of Mexico into Central America and South America, who understands the region well as the Secretary of Homeland Security. So this is an all-star team that I'm very excited about, and I'm sorry I couldn't stop it just for
I know, it's just like one of my kids.
Well, and let me add that I think Betsy DeVos is Education Secretary. That is a bold pick. I mean, it would have been very easy to go with an educrat from the blob. There's a lot of sort of natural, and Betsy has been a champion for school choice for decades, and I am thrilled to see the Secretary of Education be someone who will be a champion for kids. That's what that job should be.
System. And another one, I know we don't want to talk about everybody, but you were so great, Senator Cornyn. I know, Senator Cruz, you were supportive too, but our own Kathleen Hartnett-White.
Well, I got this.
No. We all were very supportive, but you went the extra mile. She didn't get that spot. I think she's here. She will probably be announced very soon as a very high level somewhere in D.C. and somewhere else. I can't completely tell everyone. But Scott Pruitt, I read an article, and he's great. He is a really great guy. I read an article that said...
For a guy from Oklahoma.
For Oklahoma. I mean, you got to couch that just a little bit. But he is from Oklahoma. But how unusual it is for our side to appoint someone like Scott Pruitt to lead the EPA, because our side, when they're in the White House, has always sort of thrown a bone to the Greens.
Right.
And so they've appointed someone that's a little more on the left in terms of climate science and some of the green energy renewable things. And so, my goodness, that was about as bold, too, as Betsy DeVos.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Don't forget Andy Putzer at Secretary of Labor. He's going to change that, talk about draining the swamp.
Yes.
After the Department of Justice, the Department of Labor, and I mean, we can go on and on, right?
Absolutely. Okay, so who of the new cabinet would you most like to have a beer with? I would say go on a date, but that's probably not appropriate since you're both married.
Have a beer with, I'd say, hands down, General Mattis.
I love it.
So he came by.
Not a beer summit, but
So I had a wonderful conversation. He came by my office. We spent, an hour and a half talking about the defense challenges facing this country. And my chief of staff is a former Marine. And you have never seen somebody fanboy somebody. like David was so eager. He's completely unimpressed with any senators. I'm sorry, John, but David is just like, yeah, whatever, you guys. But like General Mattis, he was so excited. And let me say, look, as we all know, General Mattis, his nickname is Mad Dog. Yes. And I actually intend to petition the Secretary of State. It is my hope that I appear next on the ballot as Mad Dog Cruz. And if I can succeed with that, we'll actually have 100% election in the state. He is a Marines Marine and an incredible leader, and I think he's going to have a huge impact at the Defense Department.
He's fantastic. I can't top that. But let me just go back to what Ted said about Jeff Sessions. You know, under the Obama administration, the Department of Justice is just another political extension of the White House.
Yep.
And I know of no one, other than maybe Ted or me, who would do a better job of restoring the rule of law to the Department of Justice and the AG's office than our friend Jeff Sessions. He's it is going to have a ripple effect that we can't even really, I think, fully appreciate at this point. But it's going to be good.
You know, the stories of General Mattis are, and by the way, if you haven't Googled General Mattis's top quotes, do it immediately, because it really is some of the greatest reading you'll ever have. But there are stories, and I have not spoken to him directly to confirm this, that wherever he goes in the military through his entire career, they had to get an extra moving truck to move all of his books. That he is such an intellect, and that wherever he would be assigned next, whether it was Afghanistan or Iraq, he would spend months preparing and reading everything he could get his hands on. Which again, you hear Mad Dog Mattis, you read his quotes, you don't really think about him as an intellect, but you can sort of see why I think President-elect Trump wanted to maybe jump the statute a little bit and try and change the rules to have him
He
up
is
front.
a learned and erudite man, and one of my favorite quotes of his, and I may misquote it slightly, but it's something along the lines of, be polite, treat everyone with courtesy, and be prepared to kill everyone in the room.
That's exactly right. Have a plan in the back of your head to kill everyone in the room.
I think
That's
one of the stories about, and we'll get off at General Mattis here in a minute. One of the stories about General Mattis, I believe after he retired from the military service about, 4 years ago, Ted, that he personally drove across the country to every Gold Star family that he could identify that where they had lost a loved one in Iraq under his command, and to pay his respects and to show appreciation. So this is you might think he's uncomplicated and one-dimensional, but he's an extraordinary selection.
How we're so lucky to have him, I think, at the top. So we have a lot of legislators and legislative staff in the room. What would any piece of advice to them as we move into, as you know, we only meet every other year in Texas, which is great. But as we move into this sort of next round of a couple of months and the slog that is the Texas legislature, what kind of advice do you all have?
You know, I'm sure they're eager to hear our advice, right, Larry?
They told me they were. Senator Hancock called and said, be sure and ask them some advice for us.
I mean, you know, first heal thyself, right? So, no, I don't have any advice, but when you were talking about the Texas model earlier, Brooke, I couldn't help but think about Governor Perry, who said, occasionally people will talk about it as a Texas miracle. And he said, it's not a miracle. He said, you know, I do believe God has supremely blessed the state of Texas, but this is the Texas model. It's not supernatural, it's practical, it's the right policies being implemented to create the environment where people can prosper and find work and pursue the American dream. So in my book, the Texas legislature has done an outstanding job, together with our great governors, from Governor Bush to Governor Perry and now Governor Abbott, and of course the Lieutenant Governor, which is always the most powerful position in the state government, at least it always has been reputed to be. But I don't have any advice for you except keep up the good work.
That's great. Yep.
Well, and I'll concur with John that actually, if anything, the advice needs to come
The other way.
the other direction. Look, Texas, we've got it really good. You look around at the men and women who are gathered here or serving. There are principled, strong conservatives in this room, and what's nice is in many ways, you know, the debates in the Texas legislatures are between a number of good options. You know, how are we going to further protect liberty? How are we going to create an even more attractive environment for small businesses to grow. How are we going to keep Texans free? That's a fabulous model. And you know, to all the folks in the Texas Ledge, I just say, you know, imagine you were sitting here next to Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi. And I will tell you an encouraging story. I was visiting some time ago with a CEO of a big company that had moved from California to Texas. And we were having a great meeting, talking about all sorts. And my question to the CEO was just, look, what can we do to help grow the company even more, to help more jobs, to help raise wages, to help expand? And he stopped midway through, started shaking his head. He said, I've never had friends in the congressional delegation. And I just said, well, welcome to Texas. I said, we like jobs. Heck, even the Democrats like jobs. They don't know how to get them, but they like them. And that is a wonderful thing. So that would be my word to the Texas legislature is bravo and keep fighting to defend freedom.
Amen. It's an interesting point because as President-elect Trump moves into the White House and as it's a sort of a new day in Washington, and if we are able at the federal level to, forgive the term, but drain the swamp, as President-elect Trump likes to talk about on the campaign field, what that really means, frankly, is devolving a lot of that back to the states.
Absolutely.
And so I know probably on behalf of all the state legislators who are here, and I'd love your thoughts on that too, whether it's healthcare or energy or education or whatever the big issues of the day happen to be, and if the White House and we all are successful, what that means is our leaders here in Texas are going, whether it's Medicaid, are going to be taking on a lot more, I think, leadership on those issues as we work to do that.
Well, that's the good news, bad news. The good news is we're going to devolve that authority to the states in so many areas. The bad news is you're going to have a lot more to do. But you can do it. Yeah. So obviously starting with Obamacare, that's one of the chief goals. While Obamacare primarily was affecting the individual market, which covers about 11 million people, obviously Medicaid and the Medicaid expansion in some states, a very flawed program, and without reforms, I just couldn't, in good conscience, support the expansion. And I believe I know Ted's in the same place. But if we can either produce an across-the-board waiver, and the state can use that money either to reform and improve the delivery of health care services. One simple thing that the state could do is use the money and let people buy private insurance through a premium support model. But there's a lot of really good ideas. So Medicaid, I think flexibility is going to be big, and I know what a big expense item that is for the state. And then a lot fewer mandates from the federal government, and a lot more individual choice and a lot more competition in the free market, which I think is going to improve not only price but quality of service. So starting there, and we made made a start at least in education with the Every Student Succeeds Act, but I think there's a lot more we can do there, and Ted's already alluded to education and the importance of that in terms, not only just across the board, but in terms of our messaging to minorities who don't necessarily consider themselves conservatives, but who see education as the key that unlocks the door to opportunity and pursuing their dreams.
Amen.
You know, I think we have an opportunity in the next year to have a whole series of incredible victories. You know, if you look at most administrations, the vast majority of what gets done in the first 2 years and often in the first 100 days. And one of the things I'm excited about is I think we're teed up. Number one, I think we're going to confirm, as I said, an all-star group of cabinet leaders, and we're going to get them confirmed and move them through the Senate. I think that's starting off with a big victory. Number two, I believe in the coming weeks, we're going to repeal Obamacare.
We will.
That is a huge deal. It has been something we have been telling the American people for 6 years we're going to do. It was the very first bill I ever filed in the Senate was to repeal Obamacare. It's been the biggest thing I've fought since arriving there. That's going to be a massive victory for Republican majorities in Congress and for President Trump. I think we're going to confirm a strong conservative to the Supreme Court. And then another avenue that I think we're going to see a lot of leadership on is reg reform. Reg reform, I couldn't be more optimistic about. And on two avenues. Number one, I know John and I have both had this experience as we've met with each of these cabinet members. Reg reform is front and center at the top of their priority list for them to go. I think on the first day in office, you're going to see President Trump reversing a whole bunch of Obama executive orders. I think you're going to see cabinet members taking on the most egregious regulations and working to undo them. And I know we're going to see in the Congress taken up using the Congressional Review Act, which gives us the power to go after certain regs. We can do that with 51 votes. The Democrats can't filibuster it. And so John and I are working together to take out many of the worst regulations. And then a final piece that John mentioned earlier is the vehicle for repealing Obamacare is budget reconciliation. That just takes 51 votes. We're going to have a second budget reconciliation later this year. That's going to be summer or fall. And there are a number of things that are likely going to be a part of that, but I think the biggest and most important is tax reform. And I am excited. I believe before we end this year, we're going to see a significant tax reform. And I'm working very, very closely with leadership in the Senate, with Kevin Brady, a Texan in the House, who's chairing Ways and Means, to drive through tax reform to significantly reduce the burdens on small businesses, on Americans, to simplify the tax code. And I think you combine tax reform with reg reform, and what that does together is it gets government off the backs of small businesses, and it poises us to see the economy take off and grow. And so I think this year is poised to have some major, major, major victories.
That's exciting. Okay, so we just have a couple of minutes left, so I have some really hard questions for y'all. First.
What's our favorite color?
Yes, no, but close. You both are the fathers of two daughters. Senator Cornyn, you're a little bit ahead of Senator Cruz. What advice do you have to him on raising two daughters?
You know.
Told y'all it was going to be tough.
It's, I would just say that, how old are your girls now, Ted?
8 and 6.
8 and 6. Well, the good news is that when they turn 20 or so, they actually become real live human beings.
That is good news.
The 12, 13, 14 is a little shaky, but they do actually become real human beings again, and I know you and Heidi will really look forward to that.
How about it? How about your favorite movie?
Jerry Maguire.
Jerry Maguire, I love it.
I don't know.
The Princess Bride.
The Princess Bride. I mean.
Okay, and I do have to tell a very quick aside on that. So I've watched The Princess Bride kind of a few hundred times. And if prompted in the wrong circumstance, I have the ill judgment sometimes to recite some movie lines from it. And so I did it out on the campaign trail, and there were some videos online and of me reciting lines, and from when Miracle Max is reviving the Dread Pirate Roberts, who's only mostly dead. And everyone under 50 knows what I'm talking about. And it so happened that Craig Ferguson, the late night host, had Billy Crystal on, and apparently showed him this thing and said, and Billy Crystal plays Miracle Max in the movie, and so Ferguson asked, what do you think of Cruz's impersonation, which is terrible, but it's what it lacks in skill, it makes up for in enthusiasm. And so he asked Billy Crystal, what would you say to Cruz? And Crystal goes, bye-bye, good luck storming the White House. And Ferguson turns to Crystal and says, do you think he'll win? And he goes, it'd take a miracle. Which are both lines from The Princess Bride, and I got to tell you, seeing Billy Crystal do that, I was like, all right, I can die a happy man.
I am done.
That's pretty darn cool.
My time on Earth is finished. Yes. Oh, that's fabulous. Anything else, again, as we wrap up, comments for this audience, happy to be back. We're so glad you're here. Any kind of a wrap-up thought for everybody? Senator, we'll start with you since we started with Senator Cornyn.
You know, as I mentioned, this is an exciting time. This is a time where an awful lot of the issues we've been fighting for, we can deliver on. I'll tell you, after the election, I brought all my staff together in the Senate office, and I said, the world has changed. Last 4 years, we have been facing a president who's a radical leftist, who despises Congress, whose values, looks down on the values of the American people. And I said, we've been in an opposition mode. We've been the loyal opposition, but our role has been fighting tooth and nail to stop bad policies that are hurting Americans. And that's something we worked every day to do. And what I shared to my team is the whole world has changed now. That's not our job anymore. Our job now is we have the opportunity to deliver on pro-growth, pro-freedom policies. And we need to be working every day to get those accomplished. And I think this opportunity, I can tell you with the new administration, President-elect Trump, the cabinet, the transition team, we are talking to them every single day. Not only at the cabinet level, they are filling in strong conservatives at the sub-cabinet level, at the White House level, and we have the opportunity, which I hope we deliver on, to actually honor the promises we made. And so I couldn't be more excited. And I do think the combination of serving with John Cornyn, each of us have a different role in the Senate. John has a role in leadership. He's the number 2 member of the Senate on the Republican side, the majority whip. That is a big, big position for the state of Texas.
It's so important for Texas. Yeah.
And, you know, I kind of like to mix it up sometimes. I do think that combination for the state of Texas is really potent for fighting for 27 million Texans. And I'll tell you, it is such an incredible privilege to have the chance to work for everyone here and work for people across the state. And it's a real privilege to do so at a time when the stakes couldn't be higher.
Let me ask you a question, and I wasn't planning to do this. Are you surprised at how conservative President-elect Trump, I mean, no one probably can answer this question more poignantly than maybe you, Ted Cruz, but are you, I know you're encouraged, but are you surprised at what you've seen so far?
I can make one promise about the next 4 years. It ain't going to be boring. You know, I can tell you, look, when I went up to Trump Tower in New York, spent time there, I wasn't sure what the reception would be. You know, he and I have had, I guess you could say, an up and down relationship.
A little bit of a roller coaster, yes.
But I spent 5.5 hours there, spent a lot of time with the President-elect, with his team, and the message I conveyed to them is I want to do everything I can to lead the fight for us getting this done. And this week, John and I, we've been working on in the Judiciary Committee. Look, the Sessions hearings, the Democrats were coming after him. That's a Department of Justice. The reason why I said I'm most excited about Jeff Sessions is because the Department of Justice touches so many areas. There's been so much mischief done with 2 lawless attorneys general that having a principled conservative there has the ability, and I believe Sessions is going to deliver on that, to turn things around. And so what I can say is I'm thrilled by what we've seen, and I want to do everything I can to encourage more and more and more of it. And as long as we're honoring the promises we made to the American people, I'm going to do everything I can to help that happen.
That's excellent. That's excellent.
Well, I appreciate what Ted said about me being number 2 in the Republican leadership. I always point out I'm number 2 in my own house, right below the cat.
With 2 daughters, how did you make that happen?
Well, they're grown up and out of the house now, so there's not a lot of competition. There's just me and the cat. So, but you know, it's been a privilege of a lifetime to be able to represent the state of Texas in the United States Senate. And I agree with Ted. This is just such a historic opportunity. And I agree that, Ted and my style differs occasionally. Did you notice that? But how boring life would be if everybody was exactly the same and brought the same sort of skill set to the table. So Ted and I are working shoulder to shoulder on so many important things. I do agree this is a historic opportunity with a Republican president in the White House. And the thing, frankly, Ted, that I'm most excited about is the fact that there are 103 federal judicial vacancies across the country. And I'm not sure President-elect Trump will nominate my first choice for Supreme Court. But I'm sure it's. But I'm sure it'll be a solid pick, and I look forward to not just changing things for the better here in the next 2 years or 4 years, but literally for the next 25 or 30 years by reshaping the majority of the United States Supreme Court, changing the composition of the federal judiciary. Look, Ted has spent his professional life as a lawyer. As a recovering judge and recovering lawyer and attorney general, and we realize it's not our first